welcome or welcome back. My name is Brittany. In today's video, I will be sharing some book reviews that I've been holding on to for a while and a little bit of a TBR. This video is not going to be for everyone today, so if that's not where you're at in life or if you're just not interested, that's totally cool. I will catch you in the next one. But if you are looking for books on motherhood and pregnancy, stick around because I have some books for you. I am filming this at around 26 weeks pregnant. My husband and I are expecting our first baby later this year, and so being a reader, naturally, I started looking at books to pick up about this topic. So I have been reading motherhood and pregnancy things since last year, and I am finally excited and ready to share some reviews and a few more things I want to read before baby gets here. I want to start off with a few fun fiction reads, some weird girl books that I do feel like really fit the bill of motherhood and the themes it explores while doing so in a fun way, because it can get kind of monotonous and boring to read about pregnancy and child development. Like, you can kind of bog yourself down. So I do want to have a few fun books to share. I've also got memoirs and nonfiction. I feel like I do have a nice mix. So let's just jump right in with my fun, weird girl pregnancy mom books. I feel like this video would not be right to not bring up Nightbitch by Rachel Yoder. My copy is currently lent out, or else I'd be holding it up in all of her glory. This book is about a mother who is in her late 30s, if not early 40s, and becoming a mom was a huge life transition for her. She was an art gallery director and then tried the, working mom daycare thing, and it just wasn't working for their life. And then her husband makes more money, and so she decided to be a stay-at-home mom. He works Monday through Friday out of town, and so she's essentially single momming it most of the week. And then when he comes home, he wants to decompress because he was just at work all week long and doesn't really know how to take care of their kid because he's not with them most of the time. There's a lot of marital strife and just frustrations as mother. We don't get her name, but as mother is trying to navigate toddlerhood basically on her own, and just that adjustment of being a career woman and now she's in the home, the monotonous day to day of feeding, changing, tantrums, all this stuff. In addition to the really great day to day motherhood stuff we get in this book, she also is experiencing some very strange symptoms. She is turning into a dog. And that's where I feel like it takes that weird girl fun turn that just keeps things interesting and wild and weird, but also exploring motherhood in a really unique way. She then turns into Nightbitch, kind of like her alter ego, and ultimately learns finding support for herself, finding friends, asking for help, advocating for herself and what she needs. Her and her husband work through a bunch of things, and she really does step into her own and into her power again as a mom, but also as a woman. And you just see her come out stronger at the end of the book. And I just thought it was a really well done book. It was the first book I had ever read where it explored maybe the darker sides of motherhood that maybe aren't talked about, because before getting pregnant and before entering this new world of stuff, I had always heard you'd be a good mom, you should just do it, and it didn't seem like anyone was having these hard conversations. And kind of a theme in a lot of the things I've picked up have been about identity or loss of identity, sense of self, what it means to be the primary caretaker of the home and now of your child, free time, marital problems that pop up, that postpartum period. It didn't seem like a lot of people were talking about it, but through literature, I've been able to explore maybe some of the not so great things and then prepare for them. So I highly recommend Nightbitch. It was one of my favorite books of last year. They did do a movie, and I feel like the movie was pretty well done. They changed a few things that I could rant about, but overall, I feel like they captured, both book and movie captured motherhood really, really well. The next one I want to talk about is Chouette by Claire Oshetsky. This is another kind of a stranger story about a woman named Tiny, and she is pregnant with an owl baby, a literal owl bird baby. And she gives birth to this owl baby and raises this owl baby as her own. We don't really get an explanation as to how or where this owl baby came to be. It's just accepted, and that's just what it is. This book is interesting though because, again, she struggles with these very similar new motherhood things, taking care of her child, taking care of herself. She was a musician, and a lot of her music has gone by the wayside. her and her husband are butting heads because he doesn't think this child should be raised as an owl baby. He thinks this child should be raised as a dog baby. And she's like, no, like, this is who our baby is. Like, she is an owl baby, and this is how we're going to raise her. What was I just saying? Even in this strange, wacky world and setting with an owl baby, you really do get to see a mother advocate for her child. And throughout the whole book, it was one of those things where I was like, is this child really an owl, or is this a metaphor for maybe just a difficult child, or just a baby in general who's colicky or has special needs? Like, because this child is not acting normal or how it should, but Tiny loves her child and is doing everything she can for her. So I thought it was, again, a really interesting take on motherhood. I do love kind of stranger stories, so I know these two won't be for everybody, but if you were looking for some fun fiction ways to explore motherhood, I thought these two books were incredible and just weird enough to keep you interested. The next book I want to mention is a memoir. This is called Motherhood by Sheila Heti, and this is her just personal journey deciding whether or not motherhood was for her. I think a lot of people can relate to this, like, should I have kids? Should I not have kids? Like, when you're an overthinker, like, this, like, idea can really bog you down and drive you crazy because there's so many reasons why you maybe shouldn't, or so many reasons why you should, or, like, you just don't know it, so you can talk yourself in and out of any option. And no one's going to tell you what the right option is. That's the problem. Like, you have to make that decision for yourself. And so in Motherhood by Sheila, she spirals and goes through that same process of, like, don't I have kids? And you get to see her think about children for a while before she ultimately decides to become child-free. But I think regardless of where you land, it was a really interesting memoir to read from, because I think that decision is so huge in and of itself, but then also to realize, like, you're not alone in this wondering and this questioning, and just seeing someone else navigate this and feel just as confused in the process was really powerful. She addresses her own relationship with her mother throughout the memoir. She consults coins, like flipping coins to try to gain answers. Like, there were just a lot of really interesting things she wove throughout this, basically taking diary entries and putting it together. And I just thought it was really well done, really interesting. And like I said, even though she decides to be child-free in the end, I think even as someone who isn't on the other side, like, we're committed now, I still got a lot out of it and thought it was a really well done memoir exploring motherhood. Another book I'd recommend is Expecting Better by Emily Oster. She is actually an economist, and so in her professional life, she is frequently looking at data and numbers and scholarly articles and breaking that down for her job. When she becomes pregnant, she took this same economist mind to look at pregnancy things, like, should you drink? Should you smoke? Like, deli meats. Like, God, I miss my turkey sandwiches. Things like that. And so she basically, this book is not giving you permission to drink. That's one criticism I have seen on this. But basically, she's presenting you with information and data and allowing you as the reader and as the mom to make that decision for yourself, because that's ultimately what it comes down to. This is broken up into trimesters, and she addresses, like, common questions or concerns throughout. It does start at conception, and then diving into first trimester, covers miscarriage, fears and data, nausea, prenatal screening and testing, gardening, weight gain in the second trimester, working out, just overall drug safety. In the third trimester, she then covers premature birth, high-risk pregnancy, and just, like, due date data. And then she does cover labor and delivery in part 5. Labor, induction, C-sections, epidurals, a little bit of postpartum, not too much, but she does cover quite a bit in this book. And I just liked the way the information was presented, the data was presented, and then it just gave me something to think about. Like, do I agree with the data that I'm being shown? And am I going to do X, Y, Z or not? Like, and I think that is really empowering to be able to have this information broken down in a easier format, because looking at data, looking at scholarly articles is not easy for the average person. I took my bachelor's in nursing, and even still, some of those are over my head. So I did appreciate how she broke a lot of these things down. And even if you, like, don't agree with her or not. Like, that's the whole purpose, is like making your own informed decision. So I did really enjoy this. Her other book, Cribsheet, is also on my TBR. That starts really postpartum and then gets into newborn care, like swaddles, sleep, bottles, breastfed, like, and into toddlerhood and beyond, as far as how to actually like raise your child. So I'm excited to read that one before baby gets here. I have it loaned out to a friend who's pregnant. So as soon as they're done, I will dig my teeth in and hopefully be summer prepared for baby. I have another fiction story that I just finished, Soldier Sailor by Claire Kilroy. Soldier is mom and Sailor is her son. And this is chronicling her early motherhood days. And what I thought really shined through with this book was the marital strife. There are probably 4 or 5 fights that her and her husband have, and like, they're so well written, they're so stressful, they're so realistic, and while we're only getting the mom's point of view in these things, we're getting the dialogue between the two, but like how things are coming across, like how things are being construed or like seen on her side, like, it just felt so real. And I don't want to say my husband and I never argue. We definitely have disagreements, but it felt like I was there. And like I could see these disagreements happening very, very easily. And so while I don't have an answer on how to avoid those things, I did appreciate being shown how much a marriage can change after kids, because I want to avoid that as much as possible, like in the negative way. I don't have the answers yet. I'll let you know if I figure something out. But I think just being aware of it, for me, like the more awareness and knowledge I have on a topic, I just feel like then I can think about it or maybe recognize like, oh my God, we're fighting at 3 a.m. again. Like, we're both sleep deprived and baby's screaming. Like, okay, something has to change. Like, what can we do? This isn't working. I think being aware of those things helps me just like basically brainstorm, like, how can we avoid this? Because these were stressful to read about. So stressful. I also think this book really touches on loss of identity. There is a really hard part where our main character feels like baby and her husband would be better off without her, and she contemplates giving up her child, and that was really hard to read about. And then she just feels so lost. There's a whole part in this book where she is meeting a friend at the park. He has 4 or 5 kids, and she just has her young son, and she's like, I like think I'm finally back, but I've been lost for quite some time. Like, I just haven't been myself. I've been away. And he says, welcome back, soldier. And I think that comparison was really fascinating to like a soldier at war and a new mom. Like, some of the things I've read, I can really see that comparison. So it's like, okay, how do we like set ourselves up for war, set ourselves up for success, and like stay strong throughout that process? Because through a few other books I'll talk about, the transition from woman to mother is massive. And I feel like it's not talked about enough. So I did enjoy this. I would be interested to reread this, just to see how I feel later after having kids. But the marital fights were incredible. They were something else. I tabbed a few pages and I ended up reading one to my husband, and he's like, can you just like not? It's like, I'm stressing out right now. It's like, I know. This sounds really stressful. What are we going to do? And then we laughed about it and didn't come up with an answer, but to be continued. The next book I read is A Life's Work by Rachel Cusk. This is her memoir about becoming a mom, and she's more known for her fiction, the Outline trilogy. But I thought this was great. I thought this was really well done. The writing was stunning. It was so incredible. Okay, I got sidetracked flipping through here. There are so many parts I feel like I could read out loud. Her writing is so beautiful. It was a very interesting reading experience because Rachel Cusk does not shy away from the very challenging and difficult parts of motherhood. This loss of identity, this overwhelm, shame around feeding or sleeping or just like letting your baby cry it out, feeling the burden, and not even a burden, just I guess the weight of being the primary home caretaker and now raising children, because in a lot of situations, like, the woman stays at home. with the baby because they're very dependent on the mom. But then also in most traditional households, the man makes more. So it makes sense logically to have the woman stay home, and then childcare, the expenses of that is like a totally different story. That's something else entirely in its own. And so you really see Rachel struggle, and this book was actually quite criticized because of how she wrote about motherhood. People were saying she was a bad mom, she didn't love her children because of the things she wrote. And I started to feel that when I was reading. I was like, oh, this sounds really like hard and bad. Like, I don't know if I want to do this, but like, again, we're committed. Like, we're here, we're in it already. But the more I thought about it, the more I appreciated her kind of peeling back this curtain on maybe the darker sides of motherhood, because again, I don't think they're talked about enough. And I think the more that they're not talked about, then the more moms that are just going to sit there and spiral in shame and thinking they're the only ones ever experiencing this feeling ever. And that's not the case. This book heavily influenced the next book I want to chat about, Matrescence by Lucy Jones. And these women have very similar stories where they're just like feeling shame, alone, lost, isolated. And I think there is power in knowing that these things happen and occur and that you are not alone, because then just that isolation just perpetuates itself if you're just like thinking you're the only one. All that to say, even though this book was heavily criticized, and I kind of felt some of that myself, she also loves her children. Like, that is also very evident. And I think it was very brave of her to share some of the things she shared. I feel like a lot of people probably wouldn't, but then again, that just keeps the hard parts of motherhood like under wraps, and then we're not talking about it. And again, it just is like this cycle that just keeps going. So highly recommend this book before reading Matrescence, just because this one really inspired the next book. And then I'll kind of talk about both of them again. But Matrescence by Lucy Jones, I do really recommend the audiobook if you're able to, only because it's narrated by Lucy, and it just adds an extra layer of intimacy. This is told with scientific information, connections between motherhood and nature, and then Lucy's own motherhood experience herself. She brings all of those things together, and it was just such a fascinating read because you're learning about the history of maybe midwifery or labor and how men get involved, and like how they used to think that morning sickness was because women didn't want their children, like they didn't want their pregnancy, or because they did something bad and so now they're puking their guts up. All these things were just so wild to learn about. But then she'll go back to nature and like talk about fungus and how fungus and mushrooms are like so connected, and then how that ties into motherhood. And then she'll bring up her own motherhood anecdote and her own story about something, and just the way it was woven together was so satisfying and really well done. I think I just preferred that storytelling structure over A Life's Work a little bit more because I liked the science and nature stuff as well, whereas A Life's Work is very memoir based. Matrescence has a little bit more science, which I was really interested in. So I almost feel like I should have started with this one, because after finishing this book and the things I have read, they've all just kind of compounded to like this feeling that women are incredibly underprepared for the postpartum period, and just society as a whole has undermined how intense the transition from woman to mother is. The phrase matrescence is a literal developmental transition into motherhood, and it is very similar to adolescence and puberty. Like, we were taught so much about, well, I mean, you could argue based on your health class, but I feel like a lot of people were talked to about puberty. It was understood as this big life change that you were going through as a teenager, and you were given a lot of grace for that because you have a lot of hormonal and mental shifts happening. But when it comes to motherhood, people don't give a shit. They're like, you should just know what you're doing because you're a mom. And so then again, you have all these feelings of shame, isolation, loneliness, not feeling like yourself, when literally every fiber of your being has changed. And I think that knowledge of it being a huge change in your life on multiple levels could maybe make that transition a lot easier if it was understood or if it was talked about more. This phrase was actually coined back in 1973, so really not that long ago. I guess is like, this is still like a newer concept, a newer developmental phase that researchers have been looking into. A lot of I'm just like scrolling through some information here just to provide you with more, because this phrase is not well known and I feel like it should be. But like, women feeling like they love their baby but they don't have the right instincts, they're not enjoying it and feeling tired, they're guilty but they feel bored and maybe resentful. Like, these are very consistent with feelings of matrescence and don't necessarily mean postpartum depression or anxiety. I think those are things to be aware of, but like, there are some expected shifts and experiences when going from woman to mother. And I think if we know about that, then we can have a game plan on what to do or be aware of it, and hopefully it won't feel as heavy. If you are looking into motherhood, or if you are a mom yourself, I highly recommend Matrescence by Lucy Jones, because her whole book is about that transition and what it looks like, what it means, like, what is it? And again, I think the knowledge and information about such a big life change is huge in setting up women for success. I would recommend A Life's Work before Matrescence, just because Lucy references Rachel's work. But regardless, if you only had to read one, I really do recommend Matrescence. I think you would get a lot out of it and hopefully feel a little less alone in your motherhood journey. Okay, I felt really passionate about that. And okay, we're gonna move on because I could keep going, but it seems like such a big deal. And like, now that I'm experiencing that for myself, it's not something that I feel like I really could have understood before. And while I'm not even to the postpartum period yet, I've been thinking a lot about it because of all the books I've read, because of like just the things and the common themes that I've mentioned, like loneliness, isolation, shame, blah, 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 all those things. I'm like, okay, how do I set myself up for this transition? Like, how do I like lessen that like load and like not feel shame and not feel so alone? Like, what can I do? Because I feel like without that preparation or knowledge, then it would feel even harder. Like, and now you have a crying baby, and like, now you don't have maybe the time to look into these things like you did before. So I'm like, okay, like, how do we like make this the best experience possible and like prepare? Like, that's what I'm thinking about. So, okay, moving on. So the next book I want to chat about is the Mayo Clinic's Guide to a Healthy Pregnancy. I have been going through the second edition on Kindle Unlimited, which is great. This was published in 2018. There are, I believe, more current versions of this. I would maybe like one from like the 2020s, like within the last 5 years, just for like the most up-to-date information. But for the most part, I feel like what's in here is pretty reasonable and a solid resource. It covers a lot of topics, and I feel good about reading it knowing it's from the Mayo Clinic. I think that's another thing that can get very confusing. Looking into motherhood as a new mom is like, you hear so much information and so much contradictory information that I think it's really important to look at your sources of where you're getting your information and really vetting it for yourself. Like, is this a TikTok from some random person, or like, is this actually backed by science? I think that's super important. So for me, I feel confident reading something from the Mayo Clinic. This covers topics from preparing to become pregnant, healthy choices during pregnancy, information for partners and dads, and then it goes month by month about what is happening to your body, but also what changes baby is making. We talk about labor and childbirth, some newborn care, which I think is really great, taking care of baby, some postpartum issues that you could maybe experience, and then just managing as parents, some survival tips. Talks about prenatal testing, genetic disorders, breastfeeding, pain relief, C-sections, VBAC or vaginal birth after cesarean, contraception after delivery, because I do not want a baby like 6 months postpartum, personally. And then just like a symptom guide. What can you do like if you have headaches or heartburn, your hip pain? I think just being aware of all that is so important. There's a whole section on complications during pregnancy, complications that can happen with labor and childbirth, and then it even covers pregnancy loss. So I have just been scrolling through this book based on where I'm at in my pregnancy, and then just if I have any questions. I think it's been really helpful. So I do recommend this book or something along the lines from a reputable source to supplement what your doctor's saying and your own information. And then I haven't really gotten into it yet, but I do want to start looking up just like basic infant care. I'm an ER nurse, but I really only see sick babies. I don't really get to see like normal healthy kids. And I don't know what normal healthy kids really do to an extent. But Mayo Clinic also has a guide on your baby's first 2 years. This is also their second edition. And this covers newborn to 3 years old, which I think is great. This book is from 2020, so this is a little more current, which I do like. And this covers so many things about children, like just how to like feed your newborn, like good sleep habits for toddlers, growth and development, illnesses and concerns, managing and enjoying parenthood, which I think is huge. We should be enjoying it as much as possible. And then just maybe some special circumstances or potential disorders that your child may have. So I think this sounds great. I'm excited to dig into this a little bit more once I hit that third trimester, and like around weeks 30, 35, just to have some idea, because I don't want it to be 3 a.m. and I'm like looking up how to feed my baby for the first time. I want to have like some information that I can build on. So I'm excited. This one is certainly on the TBR. I have one more book to share, and then 2 on my TBR. This is the, oh, it's so white, sorry, Complete Pregnancy Journal. This one is by Bibi and Beau. This was gifted to me by a friend, and it is actually kind of cool. It talks about like, you know, your family and like just like before baby stuff. You can write letters to your baby. There's a whole picture about, you know, page about mom and dad and like baby's family. So I've been filling this out as I go. It is kind of cool. It has baby shower stuff, labor prep information, registry information. And then when you get into the actual like week-to-week pages of your pregnancy, it gives you a little tiny like body update and baby update on what to expect. So it's been pretty cool. And then you get into your birth story, some checklists. This has been a really fun one. I have never had a pregnancy journal before, so I can't really say too much about it, but I have enjoyed this. And then I have just been printing out like pictures and stuff to put in here, so it's been really fun. If you're into journaling and that type of thing, I think this has been like a fun hobby and like keepsake for a baby boy. So this has been super fun. And then the last 2 books I want to get to, I'm undecided. I think I will check it out, but it is a book on hypnobirthing. I would like love to like sneeze this baby out and like be done and have a great day. But I also am like realistic with that. We can't control labor really. Like baby's gonna come, how baby's gonna come. And I don't want to be naive to like inductions or C-sections. Like, yes, you can have preferences, but like at the end of the day, there's a lot out of our control in terms of labor. I would like to try to labor without an epidural. My hospital does have laughing gas, which I want to try. Like, what else am I gonna get to try laughing gas? But I also just want to have like other tools in the toolkit, and I've heard hypnobirthing is a really good one. So that is something that's kind of on my radar as far as checking out. And then the other one is Ina May's Guide to Childbirth. This is written by a spiritual midwife, and I did actually get this off Pango, and it was signed by her. It's to Janet, but Ina May did sign it, and I just thought that was super cool. I have not really dug into this one just yet, but any pregnancy book review or recommendation site has this on here. I've even had local friends tell me about this one, but really it just says everything you need to know to have the best birth experience, whether hospital, birthing center, or at home. So I am kind of like hippie woo-woo, but then I also have my like healthcare hospital knowledge. So yeah, I'm going in with an open mind. Like, I've never had a baby before, so we're just gonna like have fun and like be as prepared as possible, because I think one thing that for me is huge and like a whole like theme throughout this video is being informed and having like knowledge about whatever's happening, Because I know in the moment, if I'm actively contracting, we're not going to be able to have a legitimate discussion about something. Like, I'm fighting for my life over here. Like, do you think I'm retaining information at this moment? No. So I want to have like some solid tools, information about labor and delivery, postpartum, newborn care, all of that, so I can have like a solid base and then build knowledge on and then be able to make the best decisions for myself and baby. So that is it. Those are some book reviews and books to check out for pregnancy and motherhood. If you have a recommendation, please leave it down below. I would love to see what you guys recommend. I hope you have a great day, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!